All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving deep into QuickBooks Online.
Deep dive is right.
But not just any QuickBooks Online feature. We're talking chart of accounts.
That's right, the real nuts and bolts.
It's your financial roadmap, and with a little help from our friends at Meritorious Consultants, LLC, we're going to make sure you're reading it like a pro.
I love those guys.
They've basically laid out a step-by-step plan in their guide for setting up your chart of accounts.
And they really drive home how important this is.
Because
a well-structured chart of accounts can actually reveal surprising insights about your business. I mean, it can be fascinating.
Okay, you've piqued my interest, but I have a feeling some of our listeners might be thinking, chart of accounts, what even is that?
Yeah, fair enough.
Can you break it down for us?
Sure. The chart of accounts, it's basically like a categorized list of every account you use to track money coming in and going out of your business.
Okay.
So that's your income and expenses, obviously, but also assets, liabilities. It's all in there. It's the whole picture.
So it's more than just a simple list of like my checking account and my savings account.
Way more. It's about understanding the different types of financial activity in your business.
Mm-hmm.
Like sales is a category, right? But you might have subcategories like online sales versus in-store sales if you have a brick and mortar.
Now we're talking strategy. So it's not just about tracking money. It's about categorizing it in a way that helps you really get to know your business.
That's it.
And Meritorious Consultants, they make a great point in their guide. A well-structured chart of accounts is like having a financial microscope.
I love that analogy.
Right. It lets you zoom in on the tiny details, but also get that big picture view.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got the what. Let's move on to the how. How do we actually go about building this financial microscope in QuickBooks Online?
Well, the good news is QuickBooks Online tries to make this easy peasy. When you set up your account, it automatically generates a default chart of accounts based on your industry. Like, are you a restaurant? Are you a consultant? That sort of thing.
Oh, that's handy. So we don't have to start completely from scratch.
Nope, not at all. But here's the catch. Customizing that default chart of accounts, that's where the real magic happens.
Customization is key. I hear that a lot.
It really is.
So what are some of the things we should be thinking about when we go to customize our chart of accounts?
Yeah.
Like, where do we even begin?
Well, first things first, take a look at those default accounts QuickBooks gave you. Are there any that just don't apply to your business? Like, if you're a consultant, you probably don't need a raw materials account.
Makes sense.
It's all about tailoring it, making it yours.
So, spring cleaning for our finances.
Exactly. Get rid of anything that doesn't spark joy, as they say.
I love it. Now, what if we need to add a brand new account, something that wasn't even on that default list?
No problem at all. That's what the new button is for in QuickBooks Online. You just click that, choose the category type like income or expense, and then get super specific.
Yeah.
You could add things like advertising expenses or rent expense.
It's like we're creating our own financial language for our business.
Yes. And it needs to be clear, like instead of just sales, maybe you have consulting revenue and product sales so you can tell them apart.
I love those granular details. It's all about clarity.
And speaking of detail, Meritorious Consultants talk about these things called sub-accounts, which can be really useful.
Sub-accounts, yeah. What are those all about?
Think of them as like mini accounts within your main accounts. So let's say you have a main account for marketing expenses.
Okay.
You could then create sub-accounts for social media ads, print ads, email marketing, and so on, that kind of thing.
So instead of lumping all my marketing expenses together, I can see how much I'm spending on each channel.
Exactly. And that level of detail, it can be super powerful when you're trying to make decisions about your marketing budget.
I bet. I'm sensing a theme here. The more detailed our chart of accounts, the more insights we have into our business. But is there a point where it becomes too detailed? Where we're just making things more complicated than they need to be?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to go overboard.
Right.
Meritorious Consultants, they are big on keeping it simple. They even say that explicitly in the guide.
So how do we strike that balance? How do we make a chart of accounts that's detailed enough to be helpful, but not so complex that it becomes a headache?
Well, you have to think about the level of detail you actually need.
Right.
Like, if you're tracking office supplies, do you really need separate sub-accounts for pens, paper, and staplers? Or would a single office supplies account do the job?
I see your point.
It's all about picking the right level of granularity.
And I'm guessing, just like with anything else, our chart of accounts will probably evolve over time as our business changes.
Absolutely. You'll probably need to add some accounts, maybe merge others, create sub-accounts, things like that. It's a living document, this chart of accounts.
A living document. I like that.
Now, speaking of making things easier, QuickBooks Online has these cool things called account numbers.
Oh yeah, account numbers. I think I saw that option somewhere in the settings.
They're super helpful, especially if you've got a big chart of accounts.
How so?
Well, each account gets a unique ID, so instead of searching for advertising expenses every single time, you just have to remember 4,000 or whatever you decide.
So it's like a Dewey Decimal System, but for our finances.
Exactly. Keeps things organized, makes it easier to collaborate with your accountant, too.
Okay, I'm sold on account numbers.
Yeah.
And this makes me realize there's a whole lot more to QuickBooks Online than I thought.
Oh, there
You
is.
mentioned advanced features earlier.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Is there a whole secret world of features in QuickBooks Online that we haven't even touched on yet?
Oh, absolutely. Things that'll really unlock the strategic potential of your chart of accounts. I'm talking profit analysis, project tracking. We can get into all that good stuff in our next segment.
Ooh, exciting. Stay tuned, folks, because we're just getting started with our QuickBooks Online deep dive.
It's going to be good.
Okay, so we've built the foundation for our chart of accounts. Now I'm ready to explore those advanced features you mentioned.
You got it.
What's behind door number 1 in the secret world of QuickBooks Online?
Let's talk about classes and locations. They might sound kind of basic,
Okay.
but they can seriously revolutionize how you analyze your business.
All right. Color me intrigued. How do classes and locations, how do they take our chart of accounts to the next level?
So imagine you want to see how profitable each of your product lines is.
Okay.
Or you want to compare, say, the marketing team's return on investment to the sales team's. That's where classes come in. They let you tag every transaction with specific categories, like departments or product lines, so you can slice and dice your data later.
So it's like we're giving each transaction a little code, and then we can use those codes to filter and analyze our finances.
You got it. It's all about getting those granular insights. And locations, well, they work in a similar way. If you've got multiple stores or offices,
Right.
you can track income and expenses by location.
Oh, that would be a game changer for businesses with multiple branches.
Yeah.
You can see which locations are doing well, which ones might need a little love.
Exactly. Like, say you notice one location always seems to have higher utility expenses.
Ah.
You can dig deeper. Maybe it's an older building. Maybe there's some energy efficiency issues going on.
Right.
That kind of stuff wouldn't be obvious if you weren't tracking by location.
Now, you mentioned account numbers earlier,
Yeah.
and meritorious consultants, they seem to be big fans of using them. Why are they so important?
It's all about streamlining. So instead of searching for advertising expenses every single time,
Right.
you just have a number, like 4,000 or whatever you decide.
Okay.
Keeps your chart of accounts nice and tidy, makes tax time a whole lot easier too.
Oh, always a plus. So it's like a Dewey Decimal System, but for our finances.
Exactly.
Oh.
Everything in its place.
Love it. You know, the more we talk, the more I realize I've barely scratched the surface of what QuickBooks Online can do.
Yeah, there's so much more.
You've got me really excited about these advanced features. Are there any other hidden gems we should know about?
One that often gets overlooked is project tracking. If you're working on client projects, you can assign expenses and income to specific projects. That way, you can see exactly how profitable each project is.
So we can go even deeper than just overall profitability.
Yeah, you can drill down to the project level.
Wow, that's powerful stuff.
Can be really helpful when you're pricing your services.
Okay.
You know, got to make sure you're not losing money on any project.
Right, absolutely. It seems like the real power of QuickBooks Online is, it's not just about tracking money, it's about understanding what that data is telling us.
It's about getting those insights, making smarter decisions.
Now, with all these bells and whistles, it can be tempting to go overboard, try to track every little detail. Is there a point where it becomes too much?
You know, like we were saying earlier, got to keep it simple.
Right.
Meritorious consultants, they emphasize that a lot in their guide.
So how do we know what to track and what to ignore? How do we decide what's truly meaningful for our business?
Start by thinking up the questions you need to answer.
Okay.
Like, do you want to know which marketing channels are working best? Do you need to track profitability by product line?
So we need to align our chart of accounts with our business goals.
Exactly. And if you're ever unsure, you can always talk to your accountant. They can give you some really good guidance on how to structure things.
Great advice. We've talked a lot about QuickBooks Online's built-in features, but what about those third-party apps we mentioned? How do they fit into the picture?
Think of them as adding superpowers to QuickBooks Online.
Oh, I like that.
They can do some pretty amazing things.
Like what?
Well, for example, if you hate entering expense receipts manually,
Ugh, don't we all?
there are apps that can scan your receipts and automatically categorize everything. Yeah, and then they sync it all to your QuickBooks Online account.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
It's all about working smarter, not harder.
So there are apps for other functions too.
Oh, yeah, tons. Inventory management, time tracking, payroll, you name it.
Wow, so we can basically build our own custom financial tech stack.
Pretty much. It's like having a team of virtual assistants.
That's amazing. But before we get too carried away with all the cool tech, I want to bring it back to the basics for a second.
Sure.
Meritorious Consultants, they had some really good advice about mastering the chart of accounts. Anything we haven't covered yet?
One thing they stress is regular maintenance.
Oh, right.
It's easy to set up your chart of accounts and then forget about it.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
But they say you should be reviewing it regularly, making sure it's still working for you.
So it's like an annual checkup for our finances.
Exactly. You want to make sure everything's still accurate, deactivate any unused accounts, that sort of thing.
Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. And I'm guessing these checkups could also help us spot potential problems early on.
Oh, definitely. It's much easier to fix a small error than to untangle a big mess later.
Makes sense. So it's all about being proactive with our finances.
Exactly. Prevention is key.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Our listeners are probably feeling like chart of accounts experts now.
I hope so.
Before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something you said at the beginning.
Okay.
You mentioned that a well-structured chart of accounts can actually reveal surprising insights about a business.
Right.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. It's all about looking beyond the raw numbers
Okay.
and seeing the story they're telling. Like, you might discover that one of your product lines is way more profitable than you thought.
Hmm.
Or that a particular marketing channel is giving you a really high return on investment.
So it's about understanding what the numbers actually mean, not just seeing them on a screen.
Exactly. Your chart of accounts, it can be a powerful tool for making those data-driven decisions.
That's what it's all about.
And ultimately, that's how you grow your business.
Absolutely. Well, I think our listeners are well equipped to go forth and build their own financial microscopes now.
I hope so.
Any final words of wisdom before we let them go?
Just remember, the goal is to create a chart of accounts that works for you, for your business. Don't be afraid to play around with it, experiment, get feedback.
Great advice. And for those who want to really dive deep, be sure to check out the guide from Meritorious Consultants, LLC.
Yeah, they really know their stuff.
It's full of great tips and tricks for mastering your chart of accounts in QuickBooks Online. It's pretty amazing how such a fundamental thing, a chart of accounts, can really change how we think about our business finances.
Right. It's like all of a sudden you have this new perspective.
And I think what's really exciting is, QuickBooks Online doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Definitely not.
We've got all these incredible third-party apps that can integrate with it.
Oh, yeah. The possibilities are endless.
It's like having a whole toolbox of financial tools.
More than a toolbox, it's like a whole workshop.
Can you give us an example? Like, how could one of these apps, supercharge our chart of accounts insights?
Sure. Let's say you're using a CRM, to keep track of your sales pipeline.
Okay.
If you integrate that CRM with QuickBooks Online, you can start to see which of your marketing campaigns are bringing in the most leads.
Wow.
Which leads are actually turning into paying customers. You can even calculate customer lifetime value.
So we're not just tracking sales in a vacuum. We're seeing the big picture, like how our marketing efforts are actually impacting our bottom line.
Exactly. And there are apps for pretty much everything. Inventory management, project management, time tracking, payroll, you name it.
It's like building our own custom financial command center.
It really is. You can tailor it to your specific needs.
That's amazing. But I imagine it can be a little overwhelming, too, with all these different options.
Well, for sure. There's a lot out there.
Any tips for, navigating the world of third-party apps?
My best advice would be start by thinking about your biggest pain points.
Okay.
Like, what are the areas where you're spending way too much time or where you're just not getting the information you need?
So it's about being strategic, not just jumping in head first.
Right. Figure out what problems you need to solve, then look for apps that address those specific problems.
Makes sense. And speaking of figuring things out, I think it's important to remember setting up your chart of accounts. It's not a one-time thing.
Definitely not.
It's an ongoing process. We need to be constantly refining it, adjusting it as our business changes.
Exactly. Meritorious Consultants, they're big on that. They talk about it a lot in their guide.
Yeah, I remember them saying that.
Your business is always evolving. Your chart of accounts needs to evolve with it.
So it's not about like achieving perfection right away. It's
No.
about being flexible, adaptable.
Exactly. As your business grows, you might need to add new accounts, create sub-accounts, maybe even restructure some categories.
You're always tweaking it, making sure it's working.
Right. And these regular check-ins, they can help you catch little errors too.
Oh, right, like before they turn into big problems.
Exactly. It's like preventative maintenance for your finances.
I love that analogy.
Huh.
So if we're going to wrap all of this up, a well-structured chart of accounts, it's more than just a bookkeeping tool.
It's a strategic asset
It helps us understand our businesses better, make smarter decisions.
and ultimately achieve greater success.
Absolutely. A huge thank you to Meritorious Consultants, LLC, for their incredible guidance. Their guide is a must-read for anyone who wants to truly master their chart of accounts in QuickBooks Online.
Definitely check it out.
And thank you to all of our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the world of QuickBooks Online.
We appreciate you being here.
Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your finances.
The more you know, the better off you'll be.
So stay curious, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.